Hello, and welcome to Markets in Focus. My name is Joe Bell, and today I want to walk you through some of the most interesting financial market themes that I'm observing. So the S&P 500 US Equity Market Index is trading near all-time highs, but it's diverging from the Global Trade Policy Uncertainty Index in ways that we have not observed so far in 2025 up to this point, and a lot of discussion around, will Trump try to fire Fed Chairman Jerome Powell? Will he not? He came out and said it's unlikely after rumors that he was going to try. But let's talk a little bit about the timeline. We may actually know who the next Fed chair is by as early as September. And then finally, more about Trump and more about tariffs. Tariffs announced effective August 1st, 50% for copper. A little bit of a repeat from Q1. A lot of companies went out and purchased copper, and we saw some of the biggest demand in copper that we've seen in decades. So on this chart here in the white, we have the S&P 500 index, US equity market index, and you can see it's trading up near all-time highs. But we also have in the blue, the Bloomberg Economics Global Trade Policy Uncertainty Index. Now, there's a lot of different policy and economic uncertainty indexes. This one's pretty interesting because it uses text mining techniques to look across news globally and look for words that track things related to trade policy volatility, such as tariffs, sanctions, renegotiations, etc. Now, before we dive into this chart, I do want to highlight that if you look at the y-axis on the left here, one thing you'll notice that's pretty different. You'll see the numbers are reversed. So it goes from lowest to highest. And it's doing this on this chart to show you how correlated these have been, because one of the things that we've seen is during the decline in the equity market, the Bloomberg Trade Policy Uncertainty Index had spiked dramatically. So on the chart, it's showing it going down in C. So you can really see since the beginning of the year, as uncertainty increased, that pretty much coincided with the decrease in equity market prices. And as global uncertainty around trade policy decreased, you pretty much saw that coincide with the massive recovery in equity markets. But look at right now, you're seeing something quite different. It has been interesting. We'll see what this means longer term, but the market is shrugging off these headlines and these news around tariffs and negotiations in ways that we have not seen so far in 2025. So just something to keep an eye on is that there does seem to be a bubbling up of tariff trade volatility news, and the market so far has been shrugging that off. We'll see if that continues over the next several weeks. Now, a lot of discussion this week about rumors that Trump will fire Powell. He doesn't have the legal right to fire Powell. Trump coming out and saying that's unlikely. We also have to remember that Powell's term is up May 2026 as Fed chairman. So if you look historically on this chart, these are all the different Fed chairs, the presidents that were nominated, and you see in the third column there the date of nomination. And in the fourth column on the right is the start of their term. Now, if you do the math across all of those, I'm not going to ask you to do the math. I'm going to do it for you. The average difference between those dates historically has been around 4.5 months. So presidents typically nominate the chair about 4.5 months before the actual term starts. So if we do the math today, you'd say Powell's term is up in May, 4.5 months before that, probably January. Okay, January. So why am I saying September? Well, this one's a little bit interesting. So let's go down the rabbit hole just a bit. January of 2026, Adriana Kugler is a member of the committee whose term expires on that date. And the president gets to nominate that replacement. Now, if we take this same math of 4.5 months ahead of that, that puts us around September or October when Trump will likely nominate the person to replace that seat. Now, there's no guarantees, but it is a decent possibility that whoever he nominates to that seat will be the person that he is expecting to then ascend to that Fed chair seat. And he likely may not give transparency about that, but I think the market will be able to read the tea leaves, if you will, around who is that nomination in January that will likely come in September, October. and see through, there's a likelihood that that's going to be the next Fed chair. So we may have an idea around September with that nomination who's going to be the next Fed chair. Now, also around tariffs, we had Trump announce 50% tariffs on copper effective August 1st. A little bit of a repeat of history here. If you remember back in the first quarter when Trump announced tariffs effective for the second quarter, you saw massive imports because companies pulled forward those imports to avoid the tariffs. History is definitely repeating itself. On July 8th, after the announcement, copper prices surged 12.3% in one day. That was the largest since 1968. So copper prices have surged because everyone's going to buy up copper to avoid those higher tariffs ahead of that, just like they did with imports in the first quarter this year. So I want to appreciate, thanks for everybody for watching. And JP Morgan, congrats. Jamie Dimon as well, congrats. If you like winners, he's done a great job of building a really an empire within the financial industry. And after their most recent earnings report, you can see that JP Morgan market cap nearly $800 billion. If you add up the second, the third, and the fourth largest banks, and those would be Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, all those companies combined don't equal how large JP Morgan is. So they are certainly distancing themselves at the top, and Jamie Dimon has certainly done a wonderful job over the past few decades of building JP Morgan's lead at the top. So very large company, very impactful. Congrats to those shareholders and Jamie Dimon. So with that, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.